Hello and welcome to another episode of One Tracking Plan a Day. Today we are covering Loom. Loom, I have a very special relationship to Loom. I would say in the last 3-4 years, it was definitely one of the significant products that really had an impact on the way how I'm working. In my projects, I have to share different kind of things with my clients. These can be quick instructions, these can be explanations, how I build something, different things. This was usually like you do it in a call, you do it in a meeting. And obviously, these meetings are really long and cannot really cover everything because like you can just put as much into this. And also like the things that I often show are repetitive. If I want to show people how to set up specific things in an analytics tool, it's often the same. I was really about to always do the same kind of things. When Loom came around, I could quickly create a video for this. Someone was, okay, how do I add this to a tag manager? I could create a Loom for it, and then I put it in my library, and then when the next person has the same kind of question, I can send the same kind of video. It was a huge productivity gain for me to reduce time for meetings, time in chats where you're long trying to explain something, but not also reducing, it was also expansion. In the end, I expanded my possibilities to show things. I showed things that I would usually have explained because I wouldn't have the time for it. Therefore, yeah, I really like Loom. And so I'm really happy to figure out, okay, what's the analytics approach to it? Okay, so how do we do this? In this series, we are creating a analytics implementation, which means we're creating a tracking plan first. We are not interested in how we add the code to track everything. No, we are more interested in how do we design the events that we need to track to then in the end have an analytics setup that we can actually really work with and can get some value out of it to understand how good the product is performing. And we are doing this in a very special way because I really want to focus in this video to discuss the design decisions. I don't want you to watch me how I put post-its on a whiteboard, which is another video format, can be interesting, but here I really want to focus on my thought process, on my design decisions, how I balance specific things. And here in this video, we will talk about something interesting, which I think a lot of products now have, and which, how to say, is quite a challenge how you put this into an analytics context. And this is like how AI features should be tracked and analyzed. We'll get to this later on. The whole process works like this. We're using my book, which you can see here, which you can also buy here, the Analytics Implementation Workbook, which has a strong emphasis on how to design analytics setups. It has a lot of parts about the technical implementation as well, but the major focus is really like how to design the whole implementation, because from my experience, the design makes the decision how many problems you will have in the future. Okay, so we will use this book in that way that we use Claude. And so when you buy my book, you get something which is called a mini version, which is just a reduced PDF, which optimized that you can add it to a Gen AI model. And so then you can just ask Claude, okay, please create me a tracking plan for X, Y, Z. And then it does it based on the book. And the results are actually pretty good. I was extremely surprised when I did it for the first time to see that I wrote the book in a way that a Gen AI model, when it has it as context, can create quite similar tracking plans to the tracking plans that I usually create. This makes it, exciting. We will use this, and as you can see here, we use this mega prompt, which took ages to come up. No, actually not. I'm someone who has not a lot of patience to create, I don't know, super prompts or something like that. What you can see here is I'm just describing what Loom does. And when you work on your tracking design in general, or when I work manually on a tracking design, this is the same way how I get started. I write down all the use cases that people can do. I usually do this in event storming sessions when I work together with a client, but you can just sit down yourself and can just make a short list of all the different kind of use cases, jobs to be done, however you want to define them. And because this is the best foundation to develop the core product activities. Quickly about product activities. I'm using a framework that I developed myself, which is the double 3-layer framework. On the first dimension, the first 3 layers are, we have the product layer in the middle, and then on top we have the customer layer, and then under it we have the interaction layer. The product layer is basically the backbone of our whole system. This is where we define how we measure the product use cases. We are not measuring how people click. We are 100% not interested in how people click. There will be never an investor's report where you actually report on, oh, that many people clicked on that button. No one cares. People are interested how the product is used. When we're covering clicks, this is what's happening in the interaction layer. On the interaction layer, we look and we can track in a very generic way how people are clicking elements. These are sometimes interesting for UX designers, but in general not super interesting because they create too much noise. It's super hard to get useful insights from, okay, we are tracking where someone clicks. This for like in the product layer, we really focus on the use cases. How do people actually use the product? You will see this in the example. The customer layer that sits on top is then where we show how our users and customers progressing when they start to use our products. They will start as new users, but then they hopefully, for example, start to record videos in the Loom case, and then they hopefully will start to share videos. And so by that, they're basically upgrading themselves. And then hopefully they come to a stage where they continuously do this every week, then or potentially every month, so that in the end they become very loyal customers to us. And we can also see it in the product usage that they stay with us and they don't start to, not record that many Loom videos anymore. So myself, for example, my projects changed a little bit over the last 6 to 7 months. Therefore, I don't need so many Loom videos anymore. Therefore, I canceled my subscription at some point. Loom, if they would have tracked, I think they tracked the same way how I describe it, would have recognized this early on because they could see that my cadence of creating and sharing videos we're starting to reduce drastically at a specific point of time. And so these are the important early indicators that you can develop in the customer layer. Okay, and so within each layer, you then have another 3 layers, which is like in product, for example, you have entities, activities, and properties. Entities splits up the product into the building blocks of the product. And so where we're covering the core features, but we're also covering strategic features. And so this is something which we will talk about today when we look into AI, how we should include that. These are the entities, and within the entities, we define activities. Activities in an entity often describes a life cycle within the entities. You will see this in 1 or 2 examples today. There's always one entity, which is the most important, let's say, it's the most important entity. I always call it the heartbeat entity. This is the core element. This defines the product. If we take this out, the whole product disappears because it's not itself anymore. And also, if we just monitor this, we can see if people just keep doing things. So you can make your guess what this is in the Loom case. And so I will show you this in a second. Okay, this is all what I describe here. And additionally, I want to check what could be the strategic angle for Loom where they say, okay, this is our take why we think that our product makes something different for our users besides recording and sharing videos. You can record and share videos in a million ways, but Loom has a specific, let's say, setup where they say, okay, this is the additional value that you get when you use Loom. And so when we check the homepage, usually the homepage is a good place to get started. First of all, you will see the video here, which is super short. And this video captures perfectly what Loom is about. This woman looks at the calendar, and I have the same reaction if I would have a similar calendar like this. And this is where Loom can help. Honestly, this video is perfect because it really shows the major benefit of Loom that I saw always in the first place. I can get rid of some meetings because I can just record a Loom. That's in the end what it does. But obviously, this is hard to translate into any kind of analytics thing because for that, we would have to need access to the calendar as well to really see, okay, do we actually reducing meetings? The interesting thing is here, when we can see here, okay, what is describing Loom? We can easily record and share. This is something we can see. We have to, let's say, we get back to this later, how we would analyze this, but at least we have to make sure that we track the things, that we can analyze it to some degree. It's not easy to analyze, but we should at least have the building blocks, so the event data, to analyze it. And then here, supercharge productivity. What does it mean? What is supercharging productivity? Obviously, as with my example from before, I can save some time. Instead of writing a long thing on Slack or having a call with, hey, I walk you through this, when I just have a quick video that I can send over. And ideally, maybe I already have it from a library, so I already have recorded, so I just have to copy the link, send it over. This saves me immediately 45 minutes. And the other thing, what it does, because not always a meeting happens. It's not like that we have unlimited time and say, hey, sure, no problem. We all have time. We have all the time in the world, so we can just meet in a meeting. No, it's also the expansion thing. It's that I might send something over to someone and explain something that in another case I wouldn't have done because I wouldn't have the time. We wouldn't have enough time in a meeting to explain it. Now this gives me the possibility to give people, let's say, 10 different links to say, hey, if you really want to go deep into this topic, here are 10 links that can help you with that. And then they can decide, okay, which is interesting for them, and then they can watch it. And in the way, Loom does it on both sides. First, it makes it really easy to record and then share the things, and also to reuse things. But also for the viewer, it's pretty, you can view it. You can view it on higher speeds. You will have chapters, so chapters are auto-generated. This is one of the AI features. Then you have a summary. So you might not even have to watch the full video. So if I recorded a 10-minute video to explain things, you might have the possibility to quickly just go to the point where you're interested in, just watch this and go away. Again, we also supercharge productivity to some degree. It's not easy to translate this into some kind of analytics setup. This is what we will look into. Let's get started to do this. Here we go. This is the whole prompt that I have. And then Claude generates me a tracking plan, which we have here. And so let's go through this one and discuss the different kind of things so that I can explain a little bit how, if I would go with the same kind of design or if I would do things differently. We start with the product entities because, as I said already, the product entities are the building blocks. When I create a tracking plan, this is where I get started because I know when I nail down the entities, usually everything else is pretty straightforward. But the entities is the part where I can make a decision on how broad it should go, what are the core entities of this product, and which are maybe entities that would describe a more strategic direction. When we look here, we have these three are cores. We have recording, we have account, and we have comment. I want to add subscription, which I always add when I work with Claude. Claude always forgets to do subscription as its own entity. I personally like subscription a lot as an entity because it builds the bridge to revenue, and like product at the end will generate revenue. And so I always like to have this kind of connection. Therefore, this is one thing that I would add. But recording, account, and common basically makes the core of recording. Obviously is the heartbeat. This is the core element of the Loom product. Without the recordings, Loom wouldn't exist. As long as recordings are created and shared, Loom is fine. If you just want to track two events, just track these two. Then you already have a very clear picture on how your product is used. Everything else is just adding context. The other ones are giving us more possibilities to dive deeper to understand how recordings are actually used. With account, obviously, we can get some account context around that. Comments, we see the other side of the recording. For example, it could be also a decision to not have comments, but to, let's say, include this into the recording as another lifecycle thing. I like that we have comments here because comments are the social, like the sharing. Let's say when we go back here, messages with your teammates and customers. Share with your teammates and customers is a strategic point, and therefore comment is, let's say, is the qualified next step after sharing. If I share something and people watch it and they comment on it, comment basically creates this cycle. I would also say that any kind of reaction to the video, and this includes any reaction here, can create this, how to say, is an enforcer for the people who create the videos to do more videos. At least this is how it worked for me. When I saw that people were reacting to my videos, writing comments to that, I was starting to add more videos. Definitely makes sense to have comment as an own entity, but it could also be that we could have just included the activities into recording. If comment wouldn't be that important for us, it could be just a part of here, but I like it that we have it here because like it's an essential part. And now we come to the fourth one. I think this is mostly down to how I prompted it, because when I wrote the prompt, I think I have it somewhere here. Every video is uploaded, gets an AI-generated summary. My problem was like, this was the only AI feature I could remember when I was writing the, let's say in the end, when I was writing the prompt. Obviously it has some more, therefore, but here, this is the reason why the model decided to take AI summary as an entity. And here we really have a decision to make. First of all, AI summary doesn't really make sense as an entity, so it's too granular. But let's call it AI productivity. It's not a good name, I admit. I don't have a better one for now, but I think it's a good enough. This is why it's important that we talk about this as a design. I would now take this design and would discuss it. If I'm internally in a company, I would discuss it with other people. I would discuss it with the product team, marketing team, and different people to really see, okay, first of all, does this language actually make sense? Does AI productivity actually make sense or not? Or maybe we find a different kind of term. I would still go now for at least my first version with AI productivity, because at least like it describes the strategic direction quite well. But why should we include AI productivity at all? Because it has a strategic value. And I have to tell you, I don't really have a perfect solution for this at the moment. We will get to this in a second, how I solved it so far. For me, right now, and this is how I approach it when I don't have a good idea, is I just want to make it visible in the first step. I don't really have an idea yet how it has to be designed that it can even create more value, because I don't really know how the data looks like and how the data interacts with the other data. And this is what I sometimes do. Sometimes I know this is important for our business, but I know that I don't really have a approach yet how to use it. What I do then is I do a very basic implementation, and I will show you this, how I solved it here, to at least make it visible, to get some data points. When I have some data points, usually when I combine it with the other data points, I might get an idea how the setup can be improved. This is what we will do here. Because I have to admit, I don't really have a strong idea yet how we should incorporate the AI productivity in a good way that it can create meaningful metrics. Because in general, measuring productivity is hard, because you never have the other version where, let's say, how do you say I'm more productive than in another way, when you can measure both ways and can say A is faster than B. But we don't have this here. In the end, we just focus on the potentially faster solution, but we don't know what the other one is. This already makes it hard, and when we then even say, okay, look, with AI, it makes it hard as well. To give you one example, Loom is creating a title based on your video's transcript, and they do it really quick. You record the video, you go to Loom, and then you start to, let's say, I don't know, want to start to edit, or maybe just want to get the sharing link. You immediately get a title proposed. In 90% of the times, I will go with the title proposed. This, for example, could be something that when we look into recording shared, that we might have a property that can tell, okay, title adapted or not, or AI title used, maybe something like this, AI title used, to indicate if people went with the AI title. Because obviously writing a title, I mean, it doesn't take long, but it's still an annoying task most of the time, especially if you really just want to make a quick reaction video, then to come up with a good title. So something like, hey, reaction to your email or so. It doesn't make sense. To get an auto-generated title is a nice thing, but it's super hard to measure the impact of it. One way could at least, so what we right now can do is we can make sure that we track if it's used or not. Okay, let's get into it, how I worked with the activities. Recording activities. We have recording started. That totally makes sense. Then we have recording completed. Also, this is good. We have these two, and then recording shared. Recording completed also have different kind of status, which I think is important because sometimes the recording could fail. Here, at least, we make sure that we have everything in there. Processing, I think, doesn't really make sense because usually, like when we track recording completed, it has been completed. I think failed makes sense because it can really happen that, let's say, a recording is failed. Also, what I like that we have, let's say that we track what kind of assets have been enabled. If someone using the camera, if they're using the microphone, if they're using screen share. So these are the three big options that you usually have. Recording source is also good so that we can really see where they recorded it from, to really see the usage of our different kind of apps or the Chrome extension. Then obviously recording shared is the centerpiece. Only when someone shares the recording was good enough that it can be shared. This would be the one important event if I just have to focus on one. And then we have recording viewed, which already then spans to the other audience. And this includes like the people which we share with to really see, okay, we can calculate a conversion rate from shared to viewed to really see, okay, how well does this work? And then recording deleted, again, not super important activity, but I will still keep it in there because like it describes the life cycle. Then account, we have account created, which makes sense. Workspace created here also makes sense to move it under account because workspaces, at least in my experience, don't play such a big role in Loom. They are there, so you can create this, but they are not like this defining thing like you have it in, for example, in Notion, where you first start with a workspace and then you create everything in there. In Loom, it feels more like a folder, like an extension. Therefore, it totally makes sense for me to put it under account. Subscription, as I already said, I would move out as its own entity. I wouldn't keep it under account. Then we have comment. Again, I was thinking a little bit about if comment is the right kind of word. We could also change it to reaction. I stick with comment because it's, I would say, close enough and it's quite speaking. The only thing is like, we also track reactions. As you can see here, comment type, we have text, reaction, video, response. Reactions is a nice thing, which is really quick in Loom, that you can just click a emoji to react to something. Therefore, but I think it still makes sense to call it comment and to have it in here. Then we have comment created, then we have comment video started. I wouldn't do that. So the idea was, so what you can do in Loom is you can create a response quickly as a video to a video, which is nice. But I wouldn't do it this explicit because I think it's an interesting feature. And I think it was a core feature when they were starting out because it was creating more this virality effect. But I think it's not as core like this anymore. My assumption. Therefore, I would just go for, we just keep comment created. And if someone responds with a video, then obviously we have the video response here. And then we have the recording created and recording shared. And there, for example, we could have something, if we go back here, so we could have something recording shared, we could have response to, and then we, for example, can have the ID of the other video that this is actually a response to. By that, we also see if this recording was a response to something. And so this would cover the whole use case already. Now we come to the AI part. Let's call it AI productivity. And I would just go in, as I said, I just want to monitor first. I would go in with AI productivity used. And therefore, then I would have all the different kind of types of the AI productivity tools that we have. When we have a quick look on the product page, we have auto titles, summaries, and chapters. So we could track this. Let's say we can have an event, AI productivity used, and then we can have, let's say, type. Then we can have auto titles, summaries, and chapters. Then I would also extend it then as the property. So for example, when a recording is shared, I would say, let's say AI title used, and then as a Boolean, and then AI summary used as a Boolean, and or potentially, or maybe as different kind of status. Oh, this would be interesting. So we could do something like AI title used, okay, original, edit, not used, something like this. It's a bit hard to track potentially. Original is easy to track, so when we keep the same thing that was suggested. Edited would be, we just changed a little bit. So here we really have to figure out if it's easy to check how much has been changed. This is something to talk about with the developers, but it still would be an interesting insight to really see, okay, do actually people use it or not? This would be interesting as a property, so we can add this as a property. Then obviously this is a clear feature, filler world and silence removal. Here again, AI productivity used. Then type filler world or silence removal, which I work a lot with Descript, and Descript does the same thing. It's a super good feature. And then this one is also interesting, but I would also just first track it very high level. Let's say, again, AI productivity used, and then type document, type Jira ticket or issue, or let's say ticket or message. Just because I don't know yet how to include this. I was thinking about this for quite a while when I was preparing everything. I don't have a clue yet how I would use it. This is my usually go-to when I don't really have a clue. Just make it visible. And this is what we do here. We just have one activity in here where we just make visible what people are using. And then when I combine it with the other kind of events, I potentially get to some point where I can say, or maybe let's sketch it out. For example, it could be that the whole workflow to create issues becomes a dominant one. Then, for example, we could pull out document or issue as its own entity. And then it's not really like about AI, then it's more like this, let's say this workflow that is enabled by AI, which wouldn't have happened without AI, but we focus on the workflow. And so then we would have document potentially as an entity, and then we would have type, let's say document, message, or issue, and then we could track things with that. But right now, I wouldn't know if this is important enough yet. I would just, as I said, I just make it visible. Okay, let's quickly on the customer activities. Here we have a very granular approach, but I like it that we can show it here. So usually I just start with first value moment, which we have here, recording shared and recording viewed. Yeah, I like it. Also like it that we really say, okay, shared would be already enough potentially because someone is confident enough that the video is good, but I like it that we include viewed because view is really this success moment. And Loom does it in a nice way that they really give you some messaging around, hey, your video has been viewed and so on. They really celebrate this successful moment. And so this makes sense. Here we have two moments, or let's say two states that lead to it. And I like it that we do it a little bit granular here. We have first discovery, which is just a recording viewed. And I think especially because Loom's growth in the beginning was a lot about people are sharing something. Someone else is watching a Loom video and thinks, oh my God, this is really cool. I should do the same thing. Therefore, I like that we have this first discovery where recording viewed is defining that. And then first recording created. Also, it's technical setup. It's really getting ready, being confident to record something. I also like that we capture this. It's more granular, but it totally makes sense to do it something like this because it makes it easier for us to monitor if we really get people into the experience. And then again, we are just adding up. We have some productivity value achieved where we have 3 recording created. I often share videos which are just viewed by one person, but it's still a big productivity gain. Obviously, the more people view it, the bigger the productivity gain is. But this can be fine-tuned. Also like that we really have something for team collaborations when we have different kind of team members. I just recognize that we don't have an activity for team member invited. We should add this to the account as well. And then we have different one, a power user, and then we have our typical at-risk one when we can see that the former usage that was quite present is not present anymore. This is the important customer layer that we really need. And then finally, interaction layer, I would get rid of element viewed. Element view is something I rarely see a use for it. Here, for example, it says like tooltip, mode, or menu. But yeah, I don't really give so much about viewing things. I already don't give a lot about clicking on things, but viewing is something. Then, I don't know, maybe I come across a interaction where I say viewing might be interesting, but here, no, don't. I would get rid of it. I would just have element clicked, because with element clicked, at least we can make sure that if, for example, the video player for Loom is quite extensive, it's also quite special. This might be interesting for the interaction designers to really understand which kind of elements are clicked. Are people actually using a different kind of speed? Obviously, we don't have it in here yet, but this would be a good extension as well, is recording viewed, that, for example, we have something like playback speed, but obviously we could also track with element clicked, if how many people are clicking on changing the speed, but I would also add it here as a property to make sure. All right, this would be, so let's say with that, I created a second version. So I recorded all my feedback here. And then, so as you can see here, now we have subscription as an entity, we have AI proactivity. So we have the refined. I would now potentially do 1 or 2 other rounds. So as we were talking, I already had some other ideas, so I would extend this a little bit more. Which, by the way, if you work with Claude, works really well if you just record this. I usually go through this and just talk my feedback into it. And then it's really good in translating my feedback and extending this stuff. This is something which I really like now working in this way. This is also like why I adapted this workflow now for my real work, that I'm still the designer, but I have an assistant who's actually, let's say, doing all the writing stuff, which I usually don't like so much. It's a really interesting tool to do this. I would do another 1 or 2 rounds to finish it up, and then I would have a first implementation that I would say, okay, we can go with that. All right, I hope this was helpful. Tomorrow I will record the next video. So if you want to watch it, make sure that you subscribe to the channel if you like the video. Check out the other videos in the series, so you will see the playlist once this video ends. And see you in the next video.